But you want to talk about China v. the U.S. in an arm wrestling competition.
The like exactly, and it's going to be like that Sylvester Stallone movie where
Over the top.
Over the Top, where it ends with the guy's forearm being broken and the bone sticking out. And right, like we're at the smack talking phase that comes before the challenge. There was an article that came out recently about an event in Aspen, the Aspen Security Forum, and Aspen itself is an interesting little town because it has taken to being the site of a lot of establishment get-togethers, jamborees, conferences during the summer off-season from ski resorts, including the Security Forum, which is a low-profile gathering of NatSec professionals from all across the West, with the participation occasionally of important outsiders. And like many of these types of events, even people who are on other sides of the aisle, who belong to different political parties, belong to different governments that might be on different sides of individual issues, they come and it's collegial, it's relaxed, everyone's friends.
Mm-hmm.
The topics being addressed were real ones. The fallout from the Ukraine-Russia war, rise in grain prices, global warming, significant threats to international peace and stability. And they were delivered with all of the urgency of, upper level undergraduate term paper. But apparently the event was dominated by Xin Gang, the Chinese ambassador to the United States, who in his comments, first of all, starkly criticized the current U.S. policy in Asia, but even more radically for the attendees, did it in a very direct, unapologetic, and downright uncollegial way. The rather than both sidesing it like one is supposed to at events like this,
Mm-hmm.
he laid out the Chinese agenda for the PRC and its role in the region, and challenged almost every element of American China policy. He even, and this was what really scandalized the Julia Ioffe, who wrote the write-up on it, quoted Abraham Lincoln, that a house divided cannot stand, in reference to Xinjiang, Tibet, Hong Kong, and Taiwan.
Okay.
That, this deeply violated the sensibilities. Pearl clutching. What's Pearl grasping? It made a real impression, to the point where the message got through loud and clear, and the balance of the conference consisted of everyone reacting to the Chinese ambassador's remarks. Now, there's a number of interesting takeaways from that conference. One is that the transatlantic deep state is a club where you can have people who nominally represent different nations, nominally represent different political orientations, but their approach is to one another is collegial. They talk through things like friends. They hang around for port and cigars after their little fireside chats. The Now China clearly is outside of that network, outside of that system of sort of responsible friends looking after the common interest. And given this audience and the fact that there's very few press at the event that you can grandstand to, Xingang's comments were received as Beijing talking to the international Western deep state, which that deep state found very alarming. Because if this is China's approach, if the PRC is indeed so threatened by American action, and offers so little room for negotiation or concessions about its own security policy, then the possibility of conflict becomes much more significant. So one of the takeaways was like, wait, is this the beginning? Did he just threaten to start World War III?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I wouldn't jump to that conclusion. However, before the invasion of Ukraine, Vladimir Putin had a similar full-throated attack on Western and NATO security policy in his region. So we can't discount the possibility that the next escalation will not necessarily be rhetorical. But it also, this intensification on the Chinese side is happening during an extremely feckless and inwardly looking period in American political leadership. Nancy Pelosi is, I believe her trip to Taiwan is still going ahead, and there's no good reason for it. There's nothing that the Speaker of the House can accomplish for Taiwan. She does not represent U.S. Foreign policy making. That's done through the executive. So it's unclear why she even needs to be there. But
is it a business deal for when she steps down?
Oh, there's almost certainly some kind of personal consideration. It may also be that I wouldn't discount the possibility that she's so out of touch and so entitled that she doesn't see the larger implications of the visit, and still has the mentality that, you know, all that China can do is complain. What are they going to do? Stop me? And at this point, the problem is bipartisan. Mitch McConnell came out to say that if she doesn't go, it'll be an embarrassing climb down and a humiliation for the United States.
Wow.
So essentially goading Pelosi to follow through with the trip, regardless of what the geopolitical consequences might be. So we can't assume that cooler heads will prevail, or that there's some, you know, evil but genius figure in the background that's puppeteering American foreign policy. It could very well be that these out of touch, lightly senile gerontocrats are just, you know, looking for their waiter, you know, that they
Well, it comes down to what we've talked about on this show before, is that and we talked about this with Daniel Bessner on Tuesday that
I was going to bring up Besner. Besner has a lot of thoughts on this.
There is a hegemony. I mean, Besner is skeptical about the war scenario for a number of reasons, but there is certainly one of the most important things that he points out is the hegemony of this kind of liberal international, which obviously includes both liberal humanitarian intervention and, on the flip side, the neoconservative project, which are actually the same project.
On the foreign policy level, that's absolutely correct.
They're the same project on the foreign policy level. So what we have here is a very dangerous ideological delusion. As you say, Kuba, it's always 1996 in DC. So you have these American statesmen and women going around the world making statements in ways which they don't even perhaps necessarily realize the implications of, because the world has changed around them. And China, for better or for worse, it's not playing softball anymore. It is very sensitive on the question of national unity, and that's probably one of the reasons they haven't gone full, pro-Russia, is because the precedent set by Russian potential annexations in the Ukraine is certainly something that China does not want to become the norm. But I think for just as there's like domestic concerns, China has to maintain a kind of nationalist legitimacy, and the American policymakers are completely. I would say there are definitely lunatics who want to provoke us into war, but I think I think what Besner points out is a lot of the saber rattling that takes place in America is just to extract money from the American treasury to get more weapons. But there is always the danger of the war by timetable, which is like once you set things in motion, you end up with escalations that can get out of hand. Now, maybe that won't lead to like thermonuclear war, but it could lead to all kinds of destabilization and things. And the economic collateral damage could have a devastating effect on the world economy. Russia has, we've seen what the result of, Russia being sanctioned is. We have a grain crisis, inflation, fuel crisis, and there's like very limited things that the United States or anyone can do about that if you exclude Russia from the global economic system. Because yes, it might not have a huge consumer goods manufacturing base, but grain and oil are still like pretty fundamental to the economy. Now you do that with China and you try and decouple the entire success, and I use this word guardedly, the entire success of neoliberalism has been fundamentally predicated on China producing cheap consumer goods. So if you try and knock China out of the system, or we get into a trade war, or there are sanctions and things like that, you've got, all kinds of like economic problems that are going to come to the fore that are going to make the Russian issue look like a walk in the park. You like your cheap bullshit from Walmart? Say goodbye to that. Where are you going to get that from now? Because no one can, you can't just replace that capacity overnight. And as Europe is discovering, like with the oil, you can't just turn on, like Russia can cause pain, which in European economies that the United States can't do anything about, because, what are they going to do? They could, I suppose, try and make a deal with Iran or Venezuela, but then that's another one of the regimes that they want to overthrow or sanction. So like, America trying to assert itself is like increasingly running out, it's increasingly coming up against a hard reality that, hey, like globalization works two ways, right?
Well, that's the entire geopolitical content of neoliberalism, neoliberal globalization was we deepen economic connections to such a point that we achieve the Norman Angel utopia that war is impossible because the linkages make no economy capable of operating independently, especially in conflict situations. Of course, his prophecy was delivered in 1912, and we all know how well that worked out. And of the elements that I think made World War One more likely was the fact that a large portion of educated opinion in the core countries entertained that delusion that it doesn't really matter what's going on the geopolitical level because economically we're all invested in each other's countries. We depend on imports in order to keep ourselves afloat economically. So no one's going to blow up the system that we all depend on. And I think that brain rot is part of the 1996 mentality of policymakers in many Western countries. They imagine that neoliberalism has succeeded in that respect, while the breakdown of international energy markets, international food distribution, as a result of war with Russia, which, while a significant country, is not the leading global industrial power. That shows that this economic entanglement is no guarantee of peace. There's no
What's
undergirding.
striking to me about the conversation that we're having with you right now, Kuba, is that it seems to be more antithetical with the position that Besner was talking about than we were actually realizing, because his position is that it's a done deal in the mind of the neoliberal economic order that this war thing is a waste of time and military conflagration is something that's not to the benefit of anyone, and it's more advantageous to maintain what is necessary to keep the economic machinations going between all of these powers. At the same time, the debate lies as to the difference between the liberal internationalists and those who are more constrained in terms of the expectation of what America can accomplish in the world in the face of the rise of China. And I think that there's a middle ground between where you and Besner is. I'm not convinced that countries that still invest billions of dollars in military technology are all of a sudden doing that just for the sake of it and don't really have any interest in using it. But at the same time, I'm not necessarily willing to go that like World War III is around the corner either. I think there's a middle ground here. I mean, and I actually do agree with you. And this is why I disagree with Besner. I think that what the Russia-Ukraine scenario demonstrates is a significant factor in terms of the global reality, in terms of how it dislodged the functionality of the system, whether people expected it or not. Yes, many people did expect that Russia would react the way it did. That doesn't mean they didn't throw shit off the kilter for the majority of the world.
I think that's absolutely right, and I think that the assumption that this economic coupling, this economic system, is going to be enough to deter the outbreak of war among major powers. Now, there were two ways that could have been institutionalized, or there were different ways that could have been approached. And one possible solution was to invite China to the table and create a global governance structure that would include the countries that had become economically essential. But as the Aspen conference points out, China remains excluded from the leadership networks of the West. The United States opted for a unilateralism based on military primacy and technological superiority, where it would dictate the terms of this economically entangled planet. Washington would decide, everyone else would accept. Now, you didn't have to go that route. There were institutions, things like the World Trade Organization, things like the UN, which would have allowed nonviolent, regularized, rule-based dispute resolution system to work in parallel with economic integration. But that requires the sacrifice of unilateralism. That requires abandoning hegemony. That is a bridge too far. No matter how dedicated the neoliberal faction was to free markets internationally, they were not willing to part with political control. And they are willing to share with junior partners like the European states, like Japan. But when a significant country, significant potential rival, somebody who could say no to an American-led agenda, were to be included, the United States always balked at that step. And we're seeing the consequences of that. There's a mismatch between a deeply integrated world economy and a political monopoly, a security monopoly that the United States is trying to enforce, which is becoming more tenuous, harder and harder to pretend that it still exists. But if you have 1996 brain and a touch of just light senility, then you're going to insist that the system still works and that things haven't really changed.
It's the high equilibrium trap. It's what they call the high equilibrium trap. Your past success blinds you to the potential problems that you will face in the future. It's what happened to China. It's what happened to the Ottoman Empire. These powers, refused to adapt to a changing world order because, in part, the political elite refused to take on the reality that the world was changing around them. That's how China ended up with the century of humiliation, and that's how and that century of humiliation plays very
valuable lesson.
Is a valuable lesson to them, which they do not. The Chinese state and the Chinese intelligentsia has a long memory and a long understanding of their country's history. And even, pro-capitalist nationalist Chinese people will praise, for example, Mao for at least establishing strength and national independence for their country, whatever the failures of the Great Leap Forward or other, missteps of this era. America, on the flip side, has this high equilibrium trap in which its ruling class. It's this is why I think ideology is important. It is blind. I mean, this is kind of funny because last time Besna came on, we were arguing about like ideology and culture mattering. But I think ideology and culture matters in this sense because the political and ideological culture that exists amongst the American ruling class does not seem to have grappled with in any meaningful way the changing material realities of the world and refuses to, make compromises with that. And that is something extremely dangerous for the global order as we see a reconfiguring of global power. If that makes sense.
Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to hit like and subscribe on your way out. You can catch the live stream of This is Revolution every Tuesday through Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific Time and Saturday, 9 a.m. Pacific Time. This is Revolution.